My brothers and sisters here at the Blackhouse Kollective, we are truly honored to have you set your foot here at the Blackhouse Kollective. The way that I thought we would do this is that I thought maybe perhaps one of my brethren, my cadres from the Blackhouse, would also give a little bit of a word about the Blackhouse before we proceed to say what the Blackhouse Kollective is about, what this space is about. I know for a fact you are not, you are not new to this space, but certainly these kind of spaces are very rare.
Absolutely.
You know for a fact that we are dominated by white supremacy. And for me, it is truly a great honor for us to be able to connect beyond seeing you on the screen or maybe talking with you via text or however, but to connect personally, you know, to feel your blood, to feel the vibration of your spirit in person. So I think I will just take this time and give just 1 minute, 60 seconds, literally, you know, because we're chasing time, yes, you know, to, I think, my brother, Retuli, just to give us a bit of a word and a welcoming word to Prof Molefi Kete Asante. Thank you so much. Asante sana.
Africa is Blackhouse, I would say, you know, it comes from the tradition of Black consciousness and Pan-Afrikanism, and also it seeks to show that the two are the, you know, two sides of the same coin, really. So our thought is influenced by Black consciousness and Pan-Afrikanism, and in the way that we take that thought and make it practical, we are really driven by, you know, I think Cabral says we must think in order to act, and we must act in order to think better. So, you know, that's what drives us, and we have a couple of programs. One you saw today, the kids. We have a program like this where we bring, you know, our elders, people who have, you know, who are thought leaders, who have led the way to come speak. We call that our philosophy in Soweto, because also the idea is to, you know, bring our people from the ivory towers and make them relevant in our everyday, you know, spaces. Well, if I'm leaving anything behind, I'm sure our brothers and sisters would chip in. I think my 60 seconds is even over. Thank you for being here.
So thank you so much, Brother Retuli, for those words, you know. But I also just, before I direct myself to Prof, I want to also, you know, acknowledge and give thanks,
that's right,
you know, to our elder,
that's right,
you know, and you know, there's something strange about the two of you for me, because I've always throughout the years, you know, seen the similarity in your surname and in his surname, Sesanti, Asante, you know. So even when the first time when I knew that you two were connected, I'm like, hey, wow, you know, the African gods are really alive. So truly, we are truly grateful for everything, you know, for the work you do, the inspiration you continue to give us. We are grateful for you to have brought Ubaba Asante here in our midst at the Blackhouse, and we know you are our leader here for the Afrocentricity International, and there's so much work that still awaits us, and truly Baba Sabulela Kakodu, you know.
First of all, let me just say that being here is a great honor. It is a contribution that you and Sister Zandi, all of your support, people and staff, it's a great honor for what you are making, a contribution to our people. The Blackhouse Kollective is a radical, revolutionary idea. It should not be, but anytime you are in white supremacist society, anything that supports black people is radical. It is also revolutionary. I've never been in a nation in Africa that is truly African. And I've never seen institutions, unless they are based on African nationalism, that are progressive in the whole continent. And I've been all over the continent. So coming here and seeing this Black collective and seeing the children have really touched me, because my question is, why shouldn't the kind of education that you are providing for our children, why shouldn't this be in the school systems throughout the country? And why is it that this has to be something separate from what it should be. So the few words that I want to leave with you, because as you know, I am very strongly an Afrocentrist, and I believe fundamentally that in order for us to advance anywhere, we must first of all look at and view ourselves as in the middle of our own history. We cannot be marginal to anybody else. We cannot be on the periphery. We were making history long before Europeans came out of the caves of Europe. We were actually making civilization thousands of years before the Greeks were ever a nation. So there's no reason why we can be standing in the middle of our own history and interpreting reality from where we see it. And so when I listen to the names of our ancestors that you have taught and that you know, that you teach our children, I am reminded of the fact that all people build on foundations. And you start from yourself, from your own cultural ground, and then you go out. But what has been imposed upon us is something that is totally artificial. And this is why throughout the continent you hear people who know more about England or about France or Portugal than they know about themselves. They learn the distances between London and Manchester, and they don't know anything about the distance between Polokwane, for example, and Shwani. I mean, that kind of thing. So we're all educated that way in racist societies. I come from a racist society. One of the we used to call it the mother of all racism, but I think that maybe we probably compared with you, you know. we fought these struggles, and you have fought them, and you have been victorious. But we have to remember that all of us are African people, and our history was cut and disrupted by the brutality of Europe's intrusion, just as it was corrupted and disrupted by the brutality of the Arab intrusion earlier. Before the European intrusion, we had the Arab intrusion, and this Arab intrusion lasted from the 7th century, this era, and until around the 20th, and still in some places like Mauritania and Sudan, you still see the oppressiveness of Arab intrusion. But European intrusion from the 15th century until now has also disrupted Africa. However, there is, and I see it in the children that you are teaching, there is this resilience, this incredible passion on the part of black children to understand the connectedness of our people. We are a world people. We're not a small people. We're world people. There are nearly 2.5 billion black people in the world. This is a big population. We are heroic people. Our heroes come from the most ancient cultures of the earth. Imhotep was the first philosopher who ever lived. He was a black man. The first woman to rule powerfully in history was Hatshepsut. She was a black woman who ruled as a queen in her own right. The greatest philosopher of the New Kingdom, Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, was a philosopher who wrote about everything. And they said he knew everything there was to know, because he knew herbs, he knew astronomy, he knew medicine, he knew history. This is our tradition. And I've just learned something recently, which I've shared with people since I've been here at the University of Limpopo and other places, is that there is a discovery. Well, black people knew it was here all the time, but the Europeans have just recently discovered that in southern Africa, not far from here, near the Mpumalanga region, there are stones that have been there for more than 75,000 years. And it seems to you've heard of them. Some people I mentioned at the University of Liverpool, they had never heard of them, right? So I'm glad somebody knows that I'm not making this up, you know, because when you know when I come from the United States where there's so much fake news, you know, you never know what's true. You know, they do that to you, right? So, but so what has happened is that now the discovery in southern Africa, not far from here, they have discovered all of these stone structures that over 100,000 sites of stone structures throughout South Africa. So this brings into question the whole argument about Bantu migration. You know, I mean, who created these lies about Africa, about how Africans, we've always been here. And we were here with the San and the Khoi. I mean, and they came long before maybe anybody else, but still you have the largest human-made stone constructions in the history of the world. They're not in Egypt, they're here. So now, as Afrocentrists, the question is, how do you explain them? Don't let the white people explain them. Because you know the white people are going to say they came from aliens out of the sky. Somebody came from Mars and did that. Or the Phoenicians did it. Or if the Phoenicians didn't do it, or the aliens didn't do it, they will say they did it themselves. That's what they eventually will say. You know, we white people did that. We built these stone items. Or they will interpret it to a point where you will not, you wouldn't even recognize it yourself. So it behooves us to go to this area and to rename it. They call it Adam's calendar. Why Adam? There's no Adam here. There's no Adam in this part of the world. Why would they create this notion of Adam's calendar? I mean, no. The thing is that you have to go to that area. You have to see that if they say that these were crawls, this has nothing to do with that. These people were probably building their own cities and building areas of shelter for themselves and for their families, and they did this all over from Manamatapa in Zimbabwe all the way throughout South Africa. This is 75,000 years ago. I mean, remember, Homo sapiens have only been on the earth for about 250,000 years. So this is like a third of the time of Homo sapiens. Things were being built here. And this will reset human civilization. We used to say that the Eredo Trench, which was built in Nigeria by a queen of Nigerians, was the largest human-made construction on the earth, because what happened was that she built a fortress around, her name was Sungbo, S-U-N-G-B-O, Sungbo's Eredo Trench. She built this trench around her entire kingdom. It was 30 meters deep and 30 meters wide. We built it around the kingdom. It was just discovered in 1984. You know, they looked through the forest and it's this trench going on for hundreds of miles. Who did? And when they discovered it, they said this took more human energy than the Great Wall. Was the very beginnings of taking these megaliths, these stones, and creating probably astronomical instruments. You know, this is because we find them throughout the continent. We find them in Central African Republic. In my book, The History of Africa, the 3rd edition, I've done a big discussion on the megaliths that are found in Nabta Playa. Nabta Playa is an area in the south of Egypt, very south of Egypt. You know, near the junction with Chad and Sudan And that area, they have discovered megaliths that are much older than Stonehenge. And yet the world knows about Stonehenge. People travel to Stonehenge, see Stonehenge. It's nothing. It's not, and it's very young in terms of human history. And then when we discover these stone structures that were created and built and constructed by the people of Southern Africa, we have something that has not been seen anywhere else in the world. So you got the beginning. And of course, during apartheid, nobody could, I mean, we couldn't explore and expound and expand on what was already here. So I give you a challenge, and my challenge is that you rewrite the history of South Africa, because it really needs to be rewritten. And we not only rewrite it from the standpoint of African people as being agents of history rather than being victims of history. And I so regret that I have to catch a plane to go back to the U.S. this afternoon. So, because if I hadn't, I would love to spend about 5 hours with you, you know, and going over many, many things about Afrocentricity. But I want to just commend to you Professor Sesanti, who is the head of our Afrocentricity International division in South Africa, and who will be available to work with you and to support you internationally, because we have it. We have not since Marcus Garvey have we created an international African organization that brings African people together from all over the world. So wherever there are African people, whether they're in Colombia or in Brazil, we have chapters of Afrocentricity International. Even black people in Europe, in Paris, in London, and Brussels, we have chapters of Afrocentricity International. The US, Australia, throughout the continent of Africa. And so we're very proud of you. We're very proud of what you are doing. We honor you, and we thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here. And I want to just encourage you, those of you who are even visitors, to support the Blackhouse Kollective. I mean, this is a support for ourselves, for our future. I mean, this is, we're surrounded by Biko's memory. I went to King Williamstown several years ago to pay my respect and honor to Bantu Biko. And I know that listening to these children, it fills me with great joy, because it tells me that what he said and how he lived will never die. And that is what eternal life is. There's no eternal life beyond, for me, beyond that. That this is the inspiration that people get and that we gain from those ancestors. I mean, when we talk about Megaliths or Sipuye, we have to have some sense that Zondeni and Megaliths, they also had the strong feeling for Africa itself and for black people. I mean, we're probably the only people who have not really taken charge of our own history and the writing of our history, because we make it every day, each moment, such as this moment. Each moment is a historical moment, but we have to write about it, talk about it. That's why I'm going to go, the next thing I do, I'm going to get on the plane and write about visit the Blackhouse Kollective, and I was just blown away by the children. You know what I mean? It's a powerful thing. So I want to thank Sister Zani and Brother Thando, for just, you know, having this space, and anything we can do to support it. I've said to, we call the leaders of Afrocentricity International Shanuti. Shanuti comes from the word Shenu, that the Europeans call cartouche, for when you write the name of the leader. But we say Shanuti for our leaders, and Shanuti Sesanti will be very supportive of you and very helpful. And you should be supportive of Afrocentricity International as well. And seeing you makes me very happy. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm just sorry that I have so short time. Right? Thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asante. I just wanted to, because there are some people maybe who have come, if anyone would like to say a word, maybe perhaps share something, ask Prof, Doc something, this is the opportunity. Regrettably, Africa, we do not have much time with Dr. Asante. He has to catch a flight back to the States for today. But as we said earlier when we started, that we just felt that we are honored to have him here in our midst, and we wanted to engage more. We're hoping for more engagement, with him. And he has stepped in here, and it's not the last time, He will come again. But if there's anyone who wants to share a word or say anything, I think this is the opportunity. But for me, there's two things, Doc. The purpose of education, and what would you say to our educators, our African educators here in Tanzania? Secondly, you've mentioned Mamuzonde and Veronica Sobukwe, who has just recently passed on. When other people pass away, there are messages and there are people say things about them. Can you please say a word also about Mama Sobukwe, in your response?
Yes, I can.
Yes, sir.
For education, the very purpose of education ought to be the creation and the development of cadres of people who will carry on the mission of the ancestors, whether that is for liberation or whether that is for a study of different fields. Education is about culture, and it's about the continuity of culture. And if our children are educated properly, then they are grounded in their own history and so forth, and then they're able to move forward. So education is necessary, but we can use, if we say that we have issues like critical thinking or reading or writing, you can do this in African languages as well as in any other language. You can do critical thinking by teaching your own culture and history as you could teaching European history and culture. So that's fundamental. And then in terms of Mama Sobukwe, let me just say this, that one of our challenges as African people is to create we had it in the past, I should say recreate, because we had it, a system of respect and honor for those who fight for us and those who sacrifice for us, so that there should not even be any second thought about what Mama Sobukwe sacrificed and gave, and the patience that she had. I am just now reading the book about Sobukwe that was written by a European who was, I guess, from South Africa, Podrin or somebody like that. Yeah, something like that. And it's on my nightstand. I'm reading it when I get a chance to read more. And I'm just overcome by how steadfast she was, and how intelligent she was, and how patient she was. So the lessons that we learn from her are lessons that are meaningful for generations. So let us praise her name and always respect her and honor her as you have done here at the Blackhouse Kollective. This is the necessary thing. It's minimum thing we can do is to recognize those who are our heroes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Brothers and sisters, our time.
Thank you, Prof Asante. My question is really about Afrocentricity. Yes. Right now, I think in South Africa we are currently fighting or battling against white supremacy, especially in our theories and thinking. So what, for you, I think reading about Afrocentricity and how you had to, really wage a struggle in tempo. So what advice would you give South Africans about?
Yes, and I must thank you very much for that question. The greatest collection of Afrocentric theorists that I've ever found, people working in research outside of my own university where I have a whole department, was at University of Limpopo. Somebody there has done an incredible job. So I met with about 21 PhD students, and the majority of them were writing their dissertations using Afrocentric theory. And I'm saying to myself, how did they get it through this university, given the fact that in the US it is so difficult for students who, if they're not with my department, they're at some other university, they're going to shoot them down or fight them or tell them you can't use the theory. Here's what you have to do. You have to, first of all, we have to overcome this thing that says that the only people who can theorize are white people. And that's the first thing. And then, because what they want to force you to do, even the black professors sometimes want to force you to use white professors that they've been trained at, and to use those white professors. You don't want to be forced into the white professors thing. They want to give you Derrida, Santos Sousa, somebody, Foucault. Foucault is a big one. But your point has to be that you want a theory that is not where Africans are marginalized. You want a theory that emerges from the Africans themselves. And one thing about, let me just tell you about postmodernism and deconstruction. These came out of the World War II, and they came out because of the whole question of identity around Jewish people. Because the Germans, they said, could identify who was a Jew. And so they were persecuted because of their identity. So they came up with this notion of the fluidity of identity, that I'm something today, but I'm not that tomorrow. I can be anything I want to be. But the only people who do that are people who have no concrete understanding of their own history. You don't find the French saying that. Our identity is fluid. No, they don't say that. The English don't say their identity is fluid either. It's only the people, they put this on people that they say are having these problems. So I think we have to be real careful about theories. And a theory that fundamentally roots us and grounds us in our own historical experiences, that's the best theory for us. And that's what Afrocentricity does. It talks about our agency. So if you're looking at literature, the first thing you want to look at is, what is the literature of my people? Why should I go to study the literature of England? I will do that eventually, but hey, wait a minute, it's right here in front of me. The thing with the English person, their literature is right in front of them. If they study, get a PhD, and literature is in that's their stuff. You see, it's right before them, but they want you to have to go beyond and get something, you see. But it's here. So you have to make the arguments. We have to keep making the argument that we can do it in our There was a question here.
Yes, and such little time, unfortunately.
I know, I'm sorry.
But I guess it's a point to what the comrade just raised just now. I too am grappling with, so I want to use the Afrocentric perspective of my own research. And part of the things that I'm constantly being accused of is homogenizing the African experience, right? And I mean, I think it's one thing to hear that sort of critique from Europeans, but I've actually come across a lot of literature, even by other African scholars, that argue that, they find the Afrocentric perspective to be homogenizing and therefore taking away from, I guess, how...
Nuance.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's also a very good question. That's why I told you I could be here for 5 hours. You have 1 minute. One minute. Okay, we gotta get on the road. Okay, here is the thing. The reason they do that is because, first of all, they have a negative idea about African culture and African people themselves. So, if I were to study Foucault, then the question is, and you are in France, the question is, can the Italian use Foucault? Can the German? They're all European. They do, you know, you can say Foucault is French. You can only be used by Foucault. No,
They all use Hegel?
Yeah, no. So is Foucault homogenizing the European experience? I mean, what kind of stupidity is this? This is a crazy kind of... No, we're not. And then they will tell you, but Africa can never... There's so many African ethnic groups. Well, there are so many European ethnic groups. And it's true, Africa has many ethnic groups, but then that means that we have to become authorities on all of them. There's no reason why you should not study and go deeper in your own particular cultural experience that as you want to. You can do that. And then you can find that there are comparative things. There are certain things that are commonalities across the African continent, just as there are certain things that are commonalities among Asians. There's a new theory that is now called Afrocentricity. And it is by, the last name is Miike, M-I-I-K-E. You can Google it. Yoshitaka Miike, a Japanese, has said, look, I am inspired by Afrocentricity because it has given me power to say what I've always wanted to say, that Europe has totalized the European experience and projected it as universal. That's crazy. He said, now I'm looking at Asian experience and I'm saying, you know, no, there's something different. Even if I go into Japanese or Indian or Chinese, we see that there are similarities among ourselves that are more similar than we are with Europe. So we have to do that, all right? And I'm sorry, if you write to, anybody, write my email down. It's masante@temple, temple.edu. And I will be very happy to be in correspondence with you. And for those of you who got here late, later than 1 o'clock, let me say, you know, I know it's hard. The traffic was rough. But, you know, one of the things when like in my case, I have to run because I got to go to the airport. But let's just try to do better in that, okay? And we'll be better. Because we are great people. There are no people greater than us. No people smarter, achieved as much. But we have to know that ourselves. And assertion is the basic, the assertion of African dignity, and we have to respect each other, love each other, but respect, you know, have a dignified way of approaching humanity. This is all rooted and grounded in our philosophy, and he will teach you more about this.